The exhibition, Picasso to Hockney, Modern Art on Stage. This is just a spectacular, large exhibition for us here at the Dayton Art Institute with 115 objects that covers the 20th century. You're looking at objects made by artists for the stage, for theater design, costume design. And when you think of artists like Picasso to Hockney, you may not necessarily think of the stage. You think of their works on canvas, their drawings, their paintings, Picasso, possibly his sculpture. But the wonderful thing about the show is it really shows how artists can be involved in multiple things, that artists don't define themselves, rarely do they define themselves as, I'm just a painter, I'm just a sculptor. There's much more overlap, and especially early part of the 20th century. I like to think of it almost like the difference between theater in New York and theater in London, where in New York, theater is theater. If you want to do something other than theater, you go to Hollywood and you act in movies and television shows. In London, the actors there, they go from movies to the theater to TV. Just there's much more freedom there. And in many ways, I think of this show as kind of highlighting that approach of just having much more freedom. This is organized by the McNay Art Museum in San Antonio. So the big props to them, certainly, for putting together such a wonderful exhibition. This first came to us, the concept came to us, proposal for the show, a couple of years ago. And when it did, both myself, because I loved the artists that are involved, and also our director, we were excited to take part in the show. And many of you know Michael Rodiger, he's our director and CEO. And here he is, dressed as he typically is for work on a Thursday. Okay, no, not really. He's dressed for Oktoberfest. He's wearing his lederhosen. Those of you who know Michael, you know he has a theater background. So this show really appealed to him, appealed to me as well. And when you look at the collection, it's not that surprising that it would appeal to me as the curator. Looking at some of the items that we have in the collection at the Dayton Art Institute that relate to theater. The wonderful image of King Lear from the 19th century. We have the Everett Shin of the tightrope walker that puts us right up at above the crowd with the tightrope walker balancing precariously, or the image on the right, the Royer of the Count. He is attending the Paris Opera. So he's on the steps of the Opera House. So theater is not that far removed from things we show typically. And the collection itself that we have on view comes from the Robert Tobin collection of theater arts at the McNay Art Museum. Tobin, he started collecting items early on in his, as he was still a college student. He first started to collect items relating to the stage. He big theater buff, clearly from a family of means, and they're philanthropists in the San Antonio area. And he collected these objects and just kept collecting. When he ultimately gifted the entire collection to the McNay Art Museum, it's more than 10,000 items. 10,000 items covering hundreds of years. Our exhibition isn't that inclusive. It doesn't show everything, but it does show the 20th century. So from that, looking at the 20th century with a kind of dipping our toes into the end of the 19th century and reaching out into present day, the 21st century is how this show works. So the earliest object we have is this linocut on the left that is a shadow puppet. Henri Matisse and the shadow puppets that he would show at the Chat Noir there in Paris. And it concludes with performance artist items by the performance artist Leslie Dill in her red ecstasy dress from Divide Light in 2008, where the words and letters just ooze out of the costume. But it really starts off in the end of the 19th century there, looking at costume designs, things by artists you may be familiar with, like Edward Burne-Jones' image on the left of King Arthur. Traditional theater costume, King Arthur's story. Burne-Jones was part of the British artists who were associated with the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. So things that were of interest to them included great detail of these prior to the Italian Renaissance, which King Arthur would fall into that from the stories of the 5th and 6th century. Alphonse Mucha, the image on our right, Mucha is the wonderful artist associated with the Art Nouveau movement. And you may remember we had a large exhibition of Mucha's posters and designs just a couple of years ago here at the DAI that proved to be quite successful. People loved the Mucha images, and in particular his poster designs that included the actress Sarah Bernhardt. So I just show as an example, here he has created the design for Medea in 1898, and here is the poster to advertise that same play on your left. Now the poster is not in the exhibition, but the costume design is. But you see Sarah Bernhardt in all her brilliance in that detail as well. Now theater really changed in the early 20th century, in large part due to this individual here. Sergei Diaghilev, who was the founder of the Ballet of Ruth. The Ballet of Ruth was one of the most important groups to shape and influence 20th century theater. He came from a wealthy family. He initially studied law, but pursued music as well as art criticism, publishing. But it wasn't until he chose to go into and promote ballet and open a ballet company that really he had his greatest success. And he worked with bold choreographers and costume and stage designs. Leon Bakst, who is in the exhibition, really elevated the level of ballet performance, and in a way that was theatrical. You can see from this image on the right, the drama and how that might appeal to a broad audience. And they featured the major performers of the era, the major dancers, Václav Nijinsky, for instance. Also, Anna Pavlova was involved, major Russian dancers. And they took European audiences by storm, and eventually performed in North America, played at the Metropolitan in New York. So they're in South and North America. And they went against traditional classicism with their ballets. They moved away from the idea that female dancers should always be delicate, and they put greater spotlight on the male dancers as well. And they believed that bringing together the multiple arts to make these ballets happen was important. So he included significant visual artists such as Henri Matisse, Pablo Picasso, and Joan Miró. Now here you see design by Leon Bakst, as well as image of Nijinsky, a costume by Bakst for Nijinsky. You get a sense from the design how rich this story would be. This is a design on the left for Scheherazade. Scheherazade, that story relating to 1001 Arabian Nights, or the Book of 1001 Nights, tales from Persia and Arabia. And it brought a freshness that inspired people greatly to see these shows. And then the costume design you see on the right for Nijinsky. Nijinsky's considered by many to be the celebrated and most influential dancer of the 20th century. He starred in Les Orientales, as you see there, from 1917. And he was an artist who, he was a quiet man, personally. He was quiet, didn't really stand out in a crowd, stood only 5'4". But he was an intense actor with great leaping ability, and he could dance on point, which was rare for male dancers at the time. Here's a couple of photographs of Nijinsky in his costume for Les Orientales. Unfortunately, his tragic story, his career was rather short, active only from 1908 to 1916. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 1919 and was committed to a mental asylum. And so unfortunately, his career was cut short. And yet the time he performed for the Ballet Russe made his name, helped make the name for Ballet Russe as well. And so you see this wonderful costume design in the exhibition. The artist that is best represented in the exhibition is Natalia Gancharova, who, like many of the artists that worked for Deklev and the Russian ballet, or Ballet Russe, she was Russian. Although I should point out that the Ballet Russe did not perform in Russia. They never performed in Russia. They put on these ballets in Paris. They were based out of Paris, and then before they traveled to Europe and other areas. Gancharova, somebody who had studied art in Moscow, studied painting in Moscow, and she brought with her this interest in her own background in the folklore of Russia and Orthodox Christian icons that she brought forth in her set designs and costume designs. You see some of them here, the costume designs. You get that sense of the folklore traditions and the traditional costume look of things, and the wonderful costume for King Dodin for the Golden Cockerel. So she's doing all aspects of the stage. We also have, now those were from earlier image from the Golden Cockerel. Here we have large set designs from a decade later that are also in the exhibition. These are larger than life-size paintings of different characters in the play that would have been along the stage in the performance. Now, in addition to Goncharova and works by her husband as well that are in the exhibition, Pablo Picasso, I don't think he needs an introduction. Of course, the Demoiselle d'Avignon I show on the right as an example of Picasso's work. It is not in the exhibition, but I wanted to bring forward the image of Picasso and Cubism that he was working on from 1907 to beyond.
It's gonna fit in here.
Sorry, was there a question?
You can make the.
If you don't have a question, if you would please mute your microphone. So we'd appreciate that. Thank you. Picasso. The show's called Picasso to Hockney, big name in the exhibition. And I was not familiar with his set design, yet here we have, these are the works that are in the exhibition, where you have not only the scene, like the one on the right, but you also have a maquette for the three-cornered hat, the staging there, and you get a sense from the slits in the maquette of how the stage screens would slide back and forth for the play. And so here we are working with these ballets by Picasso. And you might wonder, I certainly did when I first saw these, thinking, now, if you're doing a play and your stage design's looking like this and your sets are looking like this, what might the costumes look like? Well, we don't have the costumes in the exhibition, but here's an example of what the costumes for Parade looked like, which Picasso did in 1917. So these wonderfully over-the-top, crazy designs of Cubist-inspired constructions that when you look at the costumes, they really play also with what he was doing in painting as well. For example, his three musicians, again, not in the exhibition, but the painting from the Museum of Modern Art, where those musicians, they appear to have stepped right out from the figure on Parade on the left. They seem to fit right in with what he was doing with Cubist design in his painting. at that time. Now, probably my favorite artist in the exhibition, Alexandra Exter. Just an artist who worked in this constructivist, Russian constructivist tradition of inspired by Cubism, that she created, and you get that sense of the strong angularity of Cubism playing out in the set design for an unknown play on the right, as well as the lighting design that you see. And by the way, if you hear a little background noise right now, I'm afraid they are doing some yard work outside the museum at this moment, outside my office window. So I apologize for that if it interrupts. So Exter's work is just remarkable. The angularity of it. Here are two designs that she made for the movie, not a play, but a movie, Alida, Queen of Mars, from 1920. The designs are 1924. The movie came out in 1925. It's a silent film that involves people from Mars watching Earth, and a ship that takes off and travels to Mars, and there's a battle, and it ends up coming to the good of the workers. Just wonderful propaganda, Russian propaganda from 1920s. You can see it on YouTube, highly recommended. Saturday kind of fair to watch. But these are the couple of the costumes designs for that film. So bringing this constructivist, cubist ideas to costumes. Note the figure on the right, how she includes not only the design, but how it would work, how it folds in as the figure moves. And here is a film still from Alita, Queen of Mars, and the figure wearing the costume on the scene on the right. Well, what I like about this, not only is it innovative and we get this kinetic feel of the costume, but I like how it plays with 1920s fashion at the same time. Note that the flapper dresses on the left are really what you see on the right. That's just a rectangular shape in black that you see there on the right. And with then the movement parts placed atop that. And it could almost go onto one of the designs that you see in the advertisement from the 1920s on the left. So it speaks to its time.
Jerry.
Yes.
We had a comment that said the stills from Alita reminded them of Metropolis.
Yes, it's certainly Metropolis from that same era. I'm not sure what year Metropolis came out, I think 1921. But definitely the similar ideas in that. And I apologize, I'm not seeing where comments, chats are coming up. Oh, I see them here. Somebody's saying, they love that movie. And yes, it is reminiscent of Metropolis. And yes, we hope to make the recording available at some point. Not sure when we'll be able to, how we'll do that, but we hope to have the recording of this talk available soon. So playing off of the costumes, the motion, the movement of that. You see that sense also in costume design for Salome that Alexandra Exter did in 1917. But you also see that in a marionette, a puppet that is in the exhibition. You see that her puppets were not trivial, they're not childlike, but they're figures, and she made 40 marionettes that were intended to be used in a film by the Parisian director Peter Gad that unfortunately never was completed. It never was made. So I would have loved to have seen that modernist marionette movie in the 1920s. But that sense of the kinetic of a costume being more than just what you have on, but how it interacts with space, how it would catch light on a stage, all coming into play in these designs, in these kinetic designs. Another significant artist in the exhibition is Ari Matisse, the wonderful Fauvist artist. No, neither of these are in the exhibition, but I bring them in once again as examples of the artist's work, with the joy of life of these figures and these cutout designs from half a century later with the blue nude on the right, very much about the forms of figures, more so than interior. And he too worked on costume design, which is quite remarkable. The Emperor's robe from the Song of the Nightingale on the right, much rich detail. It looks like something straight out of a more recent Star Wars movie. And you also see on the left his costume design, where if you look closely enough, you can see where he has drawn on the other side of the paper to give you a sense of how the costume would look on the figure. So you're getting both front and back views if you look closely enough, and you see that, you see through the paper when it's on display. So you get to see something like this by Matisse. Now, we not only have European artists, also some Americans, but artists like Eugene Berman, American artist, who was part of the kind of surrealist movement, who brought that idea to the fore in his designs for costumes. Here he is creating costumes for the play of Giselle, in which heartbroken woman dies, and then she finds out there are ghosts that will basically lure men to dance, and the ghosts dance their partners to death. It's kind of a gruesome story, really, but it's playing out beautifully in these costume designs. And there's one stage design, I love this. This unfortunately is not in the exhibition, but when the play was produced in 1946, the critics writing about it really noted how it was an opportunity to highlight Eugene Berman's costumes and costume design and set design, that the play itself and the music seemed rather ordinary by comparison to what the stage designs were. So sometimes these artists could overtake the performances themselves, as it does in Eugene Berman's work. Now, post-war, one of the biggest artists known, David Hockney. The exhibition's titled Picasso to Hockney. Two of his works, again, not in the exhibition, but I bring them in as examples in case you weren't familiar with Hockney's. He was a printmaker, or is a printmaker, a painter, and stage designer. And part of the pop art, California pop art movement, British born, living in Los Angeles for some time. And the works he did, there are some works in the exhibition that he did for his production of Parade. This is returning to a play that the same one that Picasso had done the stage design in 1917. So this is kind of bold of Hockney. Here he is, he's 43 years old at the time, and he's considering that link of the theater to other artists, to Picasso, and in particular Parade. He's taking a big step by taking on this project. And he really highlights the Harlequin in this as a nod, acknowledgement to Picasso, who painted several images of Harlequins in his career. But really, while the show is Picasso to Hockney, I think the artist that shines most strongly at the back end, the post-war artists in the exhibition, is Robert Indiana. Again, examples of works of Indiana that are not in the exhibition, but bring them here to show you the bold use of color, of letters, of numbers, solid color. So in many ways, the exhibition could have been called Picasso to Indiana, but that sounds more like somebody's travels rather than highlighting the artist himself. So it's not Picasso to Indiana, it's Picasso to Hockney, but Robert Indiana is the highlight. These examples, I'm sure you know the Love sculpture in the center there. One of my favorites of his works is the Electric Eat, 1964, this sign that would light up saying eat, 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 that was shown at the 1964 World's Fair, that after one day was covered up. Because of course, everybody thought that's where the restaurants were, and they were not. So it seemed like bad advertisement for the World's Fair organizers, so they turned it off after one day. And in the exhibition, what we have are Indiana's costumes and set designs for The Mother of Us All. This is the Gertrude Stein play, the opera that tells the life of Susan B. Anthony. These costumes, this is from the when it was performed in 1976, initial production in 66 that he made costumes for, and then again in 76 when it was shown at the Santa Fe Opera in New Mexico, in which you have these costumes made out of felt. They're really strong, somewhat controversial, of course. As you look at this, you see all these figures. They're named very clearly with these sashes, so we can identify the characters quite easily. And the only figure and only figures in the play that did not have names were Negro man and Negro woman. And showing this including it in the exhibition kind of highlights this issue in which somebody is represented by not as a person, but as a skin color. And it spoke to, in the play, about Susan B. Anthony's views on giving the right to vote to African Americans, in which she was not necessarily in favor of that. So we bring this out in the text within the exhibition, something to consider when looking at the exhibition. The designs for these costumes are marvelous. As you see here, how the design goes from something on paper to being fleshed out into actual costume. And the sense of color that comes through is in part because of the type of design it is. Not only are the costume designs this way, but the set designs, both the costume designs and the set designs are cut paper. This was a popular kind of form of art creation, cutting paper, different colors of paper to make images at the time of Susan B. Anthony. And Robert Indiana thought it would be appropriate to use that in his creations. So he had a studio that he was working with that they all went about cutting the design. So where you see a different color is a different piece of paper that you can see in this detail here. I thought this was absolutely brilliant seeing these things in person. And this, of course, is not die cast cutting. This is all done by hand, as you can tell in this detail. Now, I want to, since I know we're closed right now, the museum is closed, and that's so frustrating because this is such a wonderful exhibition. And I only spoke on about 30 of the objects in the show. There's 115. Just want to give you a quick walk through the exhibition. So when you walk in the front of the exhibition, you're greeted by the costume and paintings by Natalia Gancharova. And you see here in the images on the left, the Four Seasons, those larger than life set paintings. And you walk in and you can see there on the right, the shadow puppet with the light coming up out of the case that our designer and preparator, Martin Pleiss, once again doing a wonderful job on that. And as you can tell, we chose not to shy away from color, working with these blues and purples. So you see straight ahead there the images by Mucha and Leon Bakst. More of the images as you walk in to the gallery here by Gancharova on the left, the larger than life size images, and a robe that she created as well. And further in, or on to the right, you see the Bakst image, that wonderful image of Nijinsky, more Gancharova works. And beyond that, you start to see the constructivist images. The fan there is by Gancharova. That Alexander Exter images in the back, as well as the marionette puppet on the right. And when you turn left, just to the left of the screen, and let's see, there's a, wait, trying to pull up a chat. Yeah, thank you. Somebody acknowledging they like how it looks. When you turn left here, then you see the that's when you see the Matisse robe. You see to the right works by Giorgio de Chirico, Joan Miró, and to the left you get surrealist imagery. You get the Picasso works here. Now we go from the blues and purples to reds and pinks and vivid color. And you walk through beyond that, you get this wonderful passageway with the Bermans on the right, and Jean Cocteau there on the left. And further beyond this, then it gets more dramatic. We're trying to use color in a kind of theatrical way, if you will, where you see these Robert Wilson designs and Jim Dine imagery. On the left, this entire row of Jim Dine designs for Salome. And as you walk down then through the hall, through the space, into the room, and it brightens back up with the reds and the pinks of the Robert Indianas, where you have the Leslie Dill imagery. As I said, the words that just ooze out of these costumes really shine here in the exhibition, and fortunately in this photo as well. Really quite beautiful work. And then on the right, you have the David Hockney, the Nevelson works behind us here. And on the back wall, then, all of the images, the costume and set designs from Robert Indiana. Now, if you're really wanting to know a little bit more as well, there's also a catalog. It's not specifically about this exhibition. It's about the Tobin collection at the McNay Art Museum, An Eye for the Stage, a catalog that, yes, it is available through the Dayton Art Institute website, the museum store. And look at that, the price is just $15.95, so it's even affordable. Really nice, wonderful reproduction. Several of the works in the exhibition are in this catalog. So that is the exhibition. We have it in-house until January 17th. However, I don't know if we will be reopened by then. I hope we are, but that was our approach to putting the exhibition together. It will next travel to the Telfair Museum in Georgia that opens in February if you don't have a chance to see it here in Dayton. So I will stop the sharing of the screen and see if there's any questions. All right.
Dr. Smith?
Yes.
Question. How long did it take to decide, and what kind of things went into the decisions on the colors of the walls? Because they're just theatrically wonderful.
Well, thank you. Just so people know, Gigi's kind of a plant.
Oh, not true.
No, she's a good friend and is a docent at a museum I worked at previously, the Phoenix Art Museum, and has seen some of the other exhibitions I've worked on. I'm not one to shy away from color. And it was really decided to just go for it with this exhibition, to be bold and strong with color, to be theatrical. And just as I've done with other designers in the past, I say, I'm looking for a blue that's deep and rich, but not on the gray side, but not too purple, because I also want to have a purple. And our designer, Martin Pleiss, he'll have 2 or 3 examples and say, and it's always, oh yes, that's what I'm thinking of. that's what I'm thinking of. And he makes some suggestions as well, where color should start or where it should end. We also use color to differentiate different areas. So when you move into the area with European and American artists, it changes into the rich red, and then the surrealists and the neo-romantics area, that's where the pink is. And then since the Jim Dine seemed kind of serious, and Robert Wilson seemed rather heavy, going dark in color, felt right to then open back up to the bright color. So it really is a kind of what will the works look like coming off of those colors? Will they stand out? One thing you don't want to do is overpower works with color, but you don't want the colors, the objects, to fade away into the color either. And fortunately with these, most of these are works on paper. So on a darker background, the white border around things helps them stand out. So that's how we decided to just go bold and make it bright and fun. And I think I'm happy with it. I've heard no complaints yet. So
It looks wonderful.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, then I want to thank you all for attending and being with us today. Sorry we can't be together in person right now, but we really do appreciate it. And of course, we are having to do things of this nature to stay connected. And I hope you will appreciate our efforts. And when time comes around to support the museum, we hope you will continue to do so. Casey, did you have something to conclude with?
I did also just want to point out that our education team is rolling out digital resources and different types of learning documents. If anybody is particularly interested in sewing or learning more about clothing, one of our awesome museum educators is releasing different tutorials through video and PDFs about how to turn everyday clothing into historical costumes. And that is inspired by this current exhibition. Later this month, too, another one of our awesome museum educators is going to roll out a resource on how to build your own diorama as inspired by the Picasso in this exhibition. So keep an eye out for those. They are released on our website. We have a section called Digital Resources, and that is a one-stop shop for anything you might want to try out or learn more about. That's it for me. Thank you so much, Jerry, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Anne, our other educators. And again, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you again before long, I'm sure.